I'm very pleased to be here the second time. First time was last year. And I welcome you all to the second panel discussion today of this year's Reside Conference, Cities and Migration. We will focus on the subject migrating cultures, inclusive design. What we're basically doing, if we look at the first half of the day, which, let's say, focused on the questions or issues around migration more from a geopolitical level or perspective, we're actually going down a bit more into the nitty-gritty, the hard facts, or even the spatial dimensions of both migration and cities. So with me today is a very illustrious group from the field of art, architecture, urban planning, and, let's say, creative development, as well as urban sociology. The speakers that will come to the stage are three parties. That's the London-based architects and urban planners Joana Dabaj and Ricardo Conti of Catalytic Action. Catalytic Action is a not-for-profit organization or studio that aims to, as the title says, catalyze change in society through various international projects. Second up is a Melbourne-based urbanist and writer, in a way also creative jack of all trades, Marcus Westbury, who's the founder and creative director of an award-winning not-for-profit project called Renew Newcastle and Renew Australia that have helped launch more than 200 creative and community projects and reopened more than 100 vacant properties across Australia. Third party consists of the Amsterdam-based urban sociologist Charlot Schans and, amongst many other positions, cultural intendant of the EU 2016 Arts and Design Program Europe by the People, Egbert Franzen. Both also of Pakhuis de Zwijger, a redevelopment project of an old warehouse in Amsterdam, into a platform for the creative industries and social innovation in urban development for, I think, now 10 years. So you know the deal. Each of these parties will present their work in 10 minutes, and afterwards we will be joined on stage by two more panelists. That's for the one, Lenka Burkerova, who's a Prague-based architect and now counselor for development of urban planning, architecture and public space in Prague 7, as well as Matthias Einhoff, who you already saw on stage, the ZKU in Berlin, founding member and co-director of the ZKU and of numerous other art collectives in Germany. But before we will be looking at these various case studies by the panelists from across the world and discuss what architecture and urban planning and the arts can contribute to the challenges and opportunities that migration holds for the urban environment, I would like to start our panel discussion with a, let's say, more general introduction or a few statements. Migration, from the Latin term migrare, means to move or to shift. And migration is a phenomenon that has occurred throughout history. And it commonly describes the change of living environments, of an individual, a group, or even an entire society in geographic as well as social terms. Migration, and we heard that a lot today, has always contributed to the richness in diversity of cultures, ethnicities, and races in all areas of the world. So in the context of integration, intercultural transfer, and the encounter of majorities and minorities, the issue of migration remains a critical factor in the successful constitution of a social fabric, as both structural objective and creative as well as political challenge. Now, the current and really unprecedented migrant and refugee crisis in Europe, with millions of displaced people in search for safety and for home, is, however, also a make or break situation for Europe and its role in the world. It might actually be one of the most crucial tests that lie ahead for the survival of the entire integration project, and I mean both internally and externally. But also independent from the European migration crisis, we have to understand that migration always occurs on various levels. Today, actually, 1/3 of humanity is on the move. So one of the most significant migration patterns, however, has been, and we heard that before, urban migration. The movement of people to cities in search for opportunities. Saskia earlier on said the city that extraordinary animal, she called it, put it quite clearly today, is the space where those without powers get to make history. Or, as Doug Saunders points out in his book Arrival Cities, history's largest migration is creating new urban spaces that are this century's focal point of conflict and change. So human migration, forced or not, affects population patterns and characteristics, social and cultural platforms, patterns and processes, economies, and physical environments. So as people move, their cultural traits and ideas diffuse along with them, creating and modifying new cultural landscapes. So the reality of this migration, our global reality, holds a great challenge for new design approaches or for designing our future environment that considers the full range of human diversity. So a design that is guided by an appropriate response to the diversity in population. It also offers the situation a great opportunity to send very clear messages to all citizens that migration can be managed only collectively through comprehensive and inclusive means. Or as Marta Zwijger earlier said, actually on point, there is no such thing, there's either active integration or there's exclusion, and that really brings it to the point. So against this backdrop, I'm coming to an end. This podium today attempts to critically reflect issues involving the reception and integration of transition and migration in cities on various scales, as well as its effects and implications on the built environment, from an architectural, from an urbanist, from an artistic, and from a design and development perspective. So that said, I would like to introduce our first speakers, Joana Dabaj and Ricardo Conti of Catalytic Action in London. A few words before. Trained architect and urban designer Joana is one of the co-founders and principal coordinators of the non-for-profit organization Catalytic Action. She has developed her experience around architecture and sustainable development, cultural heritage and migration and human rights actually across several continents and contexts in Lebanon, United Kingdom, Syria, Iraq, Greece, Cambodia, Brazil, Colombia and Thailand. So most recently, her practice revolves around working closely with communities, following up a bottom-up design approach, tackling more specifically the refugee crisis and migration in the Middle East and Europe. The work of Ricardo, who acts as the executive director of Catalytic Action and has also a background in architecture and urban design and development, focuses and tackles actually the same matters as Joana, and has furthermore worked intensely in Kenya, Cambodia, Italy, Germany, Poland, in the UK. So the stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucas. So a few days ago, we were thinking how to start this presentation, speaking about migration and how it's affecting our cities and everyday life in general. After discussing several concepts about migration, we realized that the best way is to start from within, to describe this group of people that you see in the picture. This is Catalytic Action. It was initiated by a group of young people who are trying to seek a better future through higher education in London. It was founded by 3 people, me from Lebanon, Ricardo from Italy, and Laura from the UK, and then extended to include more people coming from Ireland, Greece, Syria, and others. This made us realize that Catalytic Action wouldn't have existed if migration wasn't part of this moving world that we live in. The reason we got together is that we wanted to try to address global crisis through the use of inclusive and empowering design approaches. In 2014, one of the major crises was, and still is, unfortunately, the Syrian conflict and the global migration phenomenon linked and enhanced by it. We wanted to intervene in such context and looked for opportunities in Lebanon, the small country that is hosting 1.6 million refugees, where 1 out of 4 people is a refugee, and over 50% of them are children. The influx of population obviously had a huge impact on the built environment and in general on the everyday life dynamics of the country.
One of the guiding principles of our work is participation. Participation that involves not just the partners, local community, but also teachers, and in our case specifically children. For us, participation does not simply mean giving the people the opportunity to choose what they want among some options that are given, because otherwise that would be like building consensus rather than actually having a participatory approach. So for us, participation means empowering people through design processes that allow them to be active agents of their own development. In this picture, we were running a participatory exercise with the children to design their own playground in Lebanon. This was like a very fundamental step, not just to get ideas from the kids about the kind of space that they wanted to have, but to start the process of building ownership towards the project, which then was very important during the implementation phase and future maintenance. Another aspect that is very important in our work is to improve existing practices in the place where we work. We believe that there is a lot of creativity out there that could be enhanced through processes of empowerment, or more simply through processes of knowledge sharing. In this picture, we see a project that we actually completed a few weeks ago before coming here, which is also a play space for refugee children in Lebanon. And the story behind the fact that this is linked to empowering existing practices is because the detail of these wings was developed together with a local welder from the town. And this detail that we developed together, was very happy about it, because actually now made this work better, because this single piece of these wings actually turned out to be cheaper and stronger. So it's a small example of how empowering, which is a big word, can actually work in the details of our work.
Lastly, sustainability cannot be achieved, at least in our case, without creating strategic partnerships. It is important for experts in this field to come together to achieve a common goal by complementing each other's work rather than overstepping each other. It is essential to break the conventional authorship of projects, as this model does not work successfully in such contexts where the center of the process is the people, is not just the designer and the architect. Adding to this, strategic partnership does not simply mean signing contracts with other institutions and organizations, but it also means creating these partnerships with the local community member that we work with every day. For example, in this picture, we are having dinner at Khalid's house, who's the local carpenter. And we can easily say that him and his family played a major role in the success of our pilot project. Therefore, a project is sustainable when it is able to empower all of the actors involved. Empowerment begins with building a sense of trust and friendships. More technically, a sense of ownership, as we said before. Sustainability means that the project is able to sustain itself by the people without being dependent on the people or the designers who actually might have initiated it or implemented it. Trust and friendship is something that sometimes we forget to include in our projects. But as we keep on dealing with people and working with people, we cannot exclude it from our design process, as it is at the core of having successful and sustainable relationships. This is an example of a project that we are going to implement in a few weeks in Lebanon. It speaks about a pavilion that was set up in Milan for the Expo 2015. The idea is to reuse this pavilion to become a school for Syrian refugee children in Lebanon. This project speaks a lot about the aspects of sustainability, and the story behind it is way longer that we cannot just put in 1 minute in this slide. Throughout this project, several actors are involved to try to give a positive example about how temporary exhibition structure can be reused to tackle humanitarian crisis, and instead of being wasted as other cases that we have seen in the past.
Now let's go back to the beginning of the presentation. So 3 young graduates looking for opportunities to actually put in practice concepts like participation, inclusive design in the architecture sector. The truth is that the current architecture sector does not really offer opportunities to begin this path. A few months ago we were at a conference in Riba in London, and we were actually discussing how the old business model of architect, client, and contractor has now failed, and definitely cannot be the leading model of architecture and urban design in the following years and in the world that we live in at the moment. Our role as architects should probably now move more towards asking the right questions rather than giving the right answers. As architects, as it has been mentioned today several times, we should look at the current global crisis and conditions, and then ask how our practice can work in helping to solve some issues. We also believe that socially responsible architecture cannot be left just to those who can afford it. As I said, the market does not yet offer opportunities. But there needs to be a shift in the market where we all recognize the importance of inclusive design, and we are all willing to invest in it. Only in this way then also local architects from the same developing countries will be able to play an active role in designing and shaping their own environment. Finally, there is a very important scenario in front of us, which is how Syria will be rebuilt after the war will end, which we all hope is going to happen very soon. Is it going to be an inclusive design, an inclusive approach where the local people will be able to have an active role in the reshaping of their nation? Or is rather going to be a top-down approach like we have seen many times in the past that we believe is going to just fuel further segregations and conflicts to come? I would like to conclude by reading this quote. It's actually one of the kids we worked with in Lebanon on a playground project, and she said, "I'm here to build a playground with you, so when I go back to Syria, I can build one myself." We think like this is a very peculiar sentence because it shows how even a kid that is being engaged in an inclusive way with an inclusive and participatory approaches can grasp the importance that every single citizen has in the shaping of our future cities. Thank you.
So I'll quickly jump in again. I would like to ask Marcus now on the stage. Marcus Westbury from Melbourne is also the author of a book that you should all read called Creating Cities, a book about cities, culture and creativity that is, I guess, very much inspired by your award-winning, let's say, DIY urban renewal scheme in Australia. So I'm very much curious to hear your words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is my microphone on? I dropped it on the way up. Firstly, before I actually start, I can't come to a conference about migration as an Australian without acknowledging that the Australian government over the last few years has detained thousands of people, including innocent women and children, offshore in detention camps for no other reason than that they sought asylum in our country. And although many have been recognised as genuine refugees, our government's response has been to lock them up and detain them and to criminalise things like doctors reporting their abuse or the media reporting on the conditions in which they're being held in foreign countries on our behalf. So at times I'm very proud to be an Australian, and I'm going to tell you a good story from Australia today, but I'm not proud of that at all. I'm going to talk today about the work that we've been doing with Renew Newcastle in Australia. So Newcastle is a city that you probably have no reason to have heard of. It's important to me because it's where I grew up. It's a city of about 300,000 or 400,000 people, and once upon a time its big claim to fame was that it was the biggest steel city in Australia. To the extent that this is a story about migration, it's a story about a city from which many people left. In the 1990s, this is what happened to the steelworks. The steelworks closed, and over the course of 2 decades, a city of a few 100,000 people lost 20,000 jobs, and including many young people, went further afield, including me, looking to other cities to find work, and the state of Newcastle was allowed to deteriorate. The work of Renew Newcastle began back in 2008 when I went back to my hometown after living in Melbourne for a period of 6 or 7 years and just saw the state of the main street. As I walked down the 2 main streets of the city, I took all of these photos on my camera phone that I had at the time, boarded up buildings, smashed up buildings, empty spaces, vacant spaces, so many buildings and so much wasted potential. I think if you live in a city and that city deteriorates in front of your eyes, it happens sort of shop by shop or building by building. If you go away and come back, it's like it happens in time lapse, like a block that you remember as being very busy and vibrant from when you were there last has suddenly become all boarded up and empty. So this was the state of Newcastle in 2008, and at the time I wrote down the addresses, and then later I came back and mapped out all of the vacant, derelict and empty buildings in the city. I counted about 150 in the 2 main streets. One of the big problems with Newcastle has been that there's always a plan. Someone's got a plan. Well, everyone's waiting for the big thing that's going to come from the top down and invest hundreds of millions of dollars of government money or someone else's money. This is from 2004. I don't know when this is from. For a long time in Newcastle, the biggest industry was architects' impressions of what the city was going to be one day. In the meantime, not much actually happened. Now, the problem with this is not the content. There's some very good things in these plans, but all of these things have one thing in common. They're all looking at the city from the top down. They're looking at it as something that requires lots of money and investment and resources to come in from outside in order to transform it. I have a running joke that the large-scale revitalisation of Newcastle is 2 to 5 years away, and it always will be. It's always going to happen, but it's never happening now. So rather than think in terms of the long-term plan and what was going to happen 2, 5, 10, 15 years from now, my obsession was with what was going to happen today, tomorrow, the next day and the day after that, and to see if we could put together some sort of scheme that could help bring some life and activity back to the city. We started a not-for-profit company called Renew Newcastle, and the basic principle is that empty spaces are lost opportunities. Every day a shop or an office or a space sat empty was a lost chance for someone to do something, start something, try something, seed something, some of which may work, some of which may not. I won't go into all the details, it's a short talk, but basically we set up a system to borrow empty buildings from their owners on a rolling 30-day basis, to manage insurance, to make things, make as many things as possible that we could make easy. We didn't change any laws, we didn't build anything, we don't buy anything, we don't own anything. We've hacked every legal exemption and loophole based on contracts, from how you build mobile phone towers through to insurance protocols they've set up for markets and other things, and basically set about knocking on the doors of the private owners of those empty buildings and attempting to borrow them. We began working in what had once been the vibrant centre of town. This was back in the day when when I was a little boy, my grandmother would dress up to go shopping in town. It was a big deal. But in 2008, the same area looked like this. It was empty. One guy was there. At the beginning of 2009, we entered into a contract with the private owners of our first set of buildings, and then we began the process of going building by building, block by block, street by street, cleaning them up, fixing them up, lending them to people with creative ideas, community projects and other things, so that they could seed their imagination and their ideas into those previously empty spaces. It's been an incredibly broad mix. The rule with Renew is that the projects must do something original. They cannot be competing with an existing business in the city, and they must make what they do. And we take that to mean a very broad range of things from craft and design to sound art, jewellery, software, publishing, designing. This space was an old former doctor's surgery that was transformed into space for startups, laptop-based businesses, designers, photographers, people like that. This is the same street that I showed you before where the guy was sitting by himself just 6 months into the project. We'd gradually begun to open and more of these once vacant spaces and use them to seed new projects and new businesses. These guys were running a record label from their bedroom. A lot of our projects are actually people who were already doing something online but didn't have any physical presence. So we started to lend them a shop, we lent them a space, we lent them an office, and we gave them a chance to take what might have been a hobby to another level. This guy's an architect. I just love this, that the ceiling is done with fishing net and clothes pegs. Just a very simple transformation, that space. These were young boys. The youngest was 17 and the oldest was 21 when they came to us. They designed t-shirts and skateboards. And they wanted a space where they could sell the t-shirts and skateboards that they made. And if you'd asked me back then whether I thought that was going to be a viable business, I would have said probably not, and I would have been completely wrong, because 5 years later they pay a full commercial lease, and they're successfully selling Newcastle designed t-shirts and skateboards all around the world. These are the same streets. This is a great example of the resourcefulness of our projects. This is a co-working space. This is A-grade office space, so the owner said, you cannot put a nail in the wall. No hippies, no paint, no mess. So everything in that picture is on a trestle table. It can be picked up, it can be moved. The signage in the window is actually, the sign that says Roost in the back is actually sitting in the windowsill. And that co-working space was currently supporting 28 separate businesses, as well as being a sustainable business in its own right. Just give you a sense of the flavour of the many projects that we've been involved in seeding and supporting over the last few years. That's a very simple transformation just done with old drawers. This is an old department store in the centre of the city that had been left vacant for a long time. We built these very simple partitions about 5 metres back so that we could open up the old street windows and take this empty block that had been dead and empty and bring it back to life. So we made it home to artisans, designers, photographers. These ladies make kids' clothes. This is how that block has transformed. This is Newcastle in 2013. These are the same streets. They're now full of independent local businesses. Many of our projects have gone on to become viable. All of the green dots on this map are spaces that Renew Newcastle has reopened and transformed from vacant to empty, from vacant to active. And this is a graph of the rate of vandalism in the city. It's been declining by 25.56% per year over the 7 years since Renew Newcastle started. All up, we've done more than 220 projects. We've reopened 79 properties. The vacancy rates in the city have dropped between 60 and 90%. 500,000 more tourists visit Newcastle every year. 2 of our projects have gone on to buy buildings. There's more than 60 ongoing businesses that have been started and 27 that have signed commercial leases. About 20 places around Australia and around the world are using the model that we developed with Renew Newcastle. I won't dwell on any of these, but these are just photos from different towns and communities across Australia and in some cases internationally where people have been taking vacant space and borrowed space and using it to make things happen. I just want to quickly finish with a couple of points about what we're trying to do. Renew is not about pop-ups, it's not about making things look better, it's not about the buzz or the vibe or any of those things. It's about lowering the barrier of entry, lowering the cost and complexity of participation, encouraging creative risk and allowing more people to try more things. It's bending the curve so that more people can take part in changing their city through their actions. I firmly believe that great places come from organic experiments, and a city is something we make through our actions. We discover what our cities can be by doing it, and Renew is a mechanism for rolling up our sleeves and doing it. Thank you.
So, as the third party, I would like to invite Charlot up on the stage, representing herself and Egbert. Charlot is an urban sociologist. She's also the program coordinator and maker of the Pakhuis de Zwijger, and she is also the project leader of a new platform called New Europe Cities in Transition. The stage is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Let me see. Yeah. Oh no. This is our building, which is terrible to pronounce in English. Sorry for that, Lucas. But it's Pakhuis de Zwijger. It's a platform in the city of Amsterdam that over the last 10 years has been redeveloped by my director Egbert Franse, who will be joining the panel later, into a platform for the creative industries, but mostly for collaborative city making or social innovation in urban development. This is me. We are located on the waterfront in the city of Amsterdam, and what we mainly do is we make programs. We organize events such as this one. We do a lot. Over the past year, we've organized 538 events in the city of Amsterdam, all focused on innovative urban development or the creative industries or the role of creatives in urban development, focusing on the circular economy, on collaborative area development, focusing on business models for independently working artists, focusing on new democratic issues or new democracy, a lot of topics. Today our online and offline community has grown over 88,000 annual visitors of our platform and members of our community, which for us is very important because we don't believe in the distance between speakers and the audience. We really believe that if you're a member of our platform, you may also be a speaker in the next event, and so there is a very low threshold for being a member of our platform. And this is because we are focused mostly on what we started to call city makers. Those are the pioneering individuals that start up great and innovative initiatives to make their cities more innovative, more resilient, more creative, or more inclusive, livable whatsoever. And we try to give them a platform and invite other people to join, to listen, to learn from their practices. For the past 2 years, I have been working on a platform called New Europe Cities in Transition, which has been an extension of what we started to call New Amsterdam City in Transition, connecting a lot of cities throughout Europe on an online platform, but also through offline activities, trying to tell the stories of those city makers in European capital cities, to share share the practices and learn from the experiences in different meetings. And only 2 weeks ago, we've been organizing the City Makers Summit, and it's great to know that, in particular, the Central European city makers, including Martin Barry, were also presented there. But we have organized a 4-day event where we connected 600 city makers from a total of 150 cities in the city of all over Europe to come to the city of Amsterdam. And this was in particular because we knew that at the moment there was an informal ministerial conference happening for the agreement of the urban agenda for the European Union, included in what was called the Pact of Amsterdam. And we knew this already for 2 years. So collaboratively with all the city makers throughout Europe, we had been working on a sort of statement which was called the City Makers Agenda in our magazine. That we were able to present at the ministers' conference to invite them to join the city makers in enhancing the social innovation and engage in a more socially innovative city making processes. So here I am representing the city makers together with Amalia Zeppu from the city of Athens, who is the vice mayor for civil society, which was a great collaboration. In particular, focusing on the issue that we are addressing today, the inclusion of refugees and migrants. One part of the urban agenda for the European Union is the inclusion of refugees and migrants. And this priority theme is addressed actually by the city of Amsterdam. And this is our mayor, who on the 21st of April has invited the 28 capital mayors of the European Union to talk in particular about this subject. And during the evening hours, we invited both him and the mayor of Athens, Mr. Kaminis, to join in one of our events, which was called the Mayor's Dialogue, to talk to city makers about how bottom-up, small-scale initiatives could actually cooperate with city mayors to allow for a more sustainable inclusion of refugees and migrants. And one of the things that we found very interesting is that it's not the political unwill of most mayors to work together with civil society to enhance this, but in our case, this is what I'm saying, there's a lot of grassroots initiatives that are trying to formulate responses to the refugee crisis at the moment. And what we've learned from our mayor, for example, is that in the city of Amsterdam for refugee shelter, the national government is actually forcing upon the city of Amsterdam to have a well-working business model, including 2,500 migrants or newcomers in the city of Amsterdam into what was before our prison, which doesn't really look inviting, if you ask me. And our mayor told us that he would love to have a more small-scale and resilient and more sustainable solution coming from city makers, but he feels restricted by his national government. So this is something I think that we face a lot in cities today. So that was how the national government wants to give refugees a shelter in the city of Amsterdam. So let me quickly take you along some of the smaller scale bottom-up initiatives, which we already seen before, the wonderful Refugees Welcome initiative and all the other ones that were presented. This is the initiative of Host in the city of Amsterdam, which is a group of residents from the Eastern District that transformed an old school into a residential place for refugees from Syria that just came to Amsterdam. And they've crowdfunded the entire project to be able to host 40 refugees within their neighborhood. They get language classes, they cook together, they form long-lasting friendships, which is a very sustainable solution. Another option, also an old school, transformed into a creative hub for the many artistic refugees that are coming from Syria, Lebanon, Eritrea today. And in this creative hub, they work side to side to artists from the city of Amsterdam, also allowing for an actual integration in society. And the idea is that this creative hub will be self-supportive or self-run by the refugees within a couple of months. In our own venue, the last couple of months, we've organized a monthly dinner, Eat to Meet, where newcoming Amsterdammers would be connected to their professional peers over dinner, because this is one of the greatest moments to meet, and also the music was provided by a group of former refugees. This is a good example from the city of Vienna, for example, that's also on our platform, which is called the Machtas Hotel. Maybe some of you may know it. This is a hotel where tourists are meeting refugees that work in the hotel and actually get professional hotel training and allowing them for integration into the labor market in the future. And this at the moment, as Lucas already said, my director is at this moment the cultural intendant for the Arts and Design program under the presidency of the European Union that's in Amsterdam right now. And one of the things that we have developed is Fab City, which is a maker space where experimentation takes place of urban innovators, creating a more resilient city, allowing for small-scale tiny houses, for example, or a 3D printer that at the moment is printing a bridge from metal, or all sorts of urban innovations. But this also allows for an excellent example where small-scale housing is developed. And because of the showcase now today, luckily the national government is talking to the people who constructed these kinds of buildings to see if this could provide shelter for refugees. And this would be excellent, of course, because it's more livable than the prison I was showing before, but also because these are buildings that could move into vacant lots in the city and that are also almost autarkic, so they would have solar panels on the roof, they would be working with grey water systems, so this would be allowing for innovation in many ways, but also an opportunity for migrants or refugees to have a more livable shelter. And as I said, there's thousands of these sorts of initiatives throughout Europe that we have encountered the last couple of years, not only about refugees and migrants, but also a lot of them trying to engage them into societies. And we've brought a couple of the magazines, but it's also available online. One of the things that we've presented to the ministers of the European Union is, amongst others, an article about these small-scale initiatives in different cities throughout Europe. So I invite you all to read this. And of course, as was being said a couple of times today, we don't believe that the solutions for the refugee crisis can only be come from bottom up. It should be actually in collaboration with many stakeholders in the city. We may provide a place for those city makers to meet with all the different layers into society. And this is maybe a good example because the municipality of Amsterdam did sign an agreement last week or 2 weeks ago, I think, where over 40 big companies in the city of Amsterdam, but also civil society organizations and knowledge institutions collaborate in providing training for refugees and actually allowing them to enter the labor market. So I think this is something we can be very proud of and which could be an example for other cities throughout Europe. Because this is one of the things that we strongly believe in. Innovation in the city doesn't come from only either one of these directions, but it's very important to think of social innovation where a quadruple helix of different stakeholders, corporates, knowledge institutions, civil society organizations, and the local municipality collaborate. So thank you. This is it for now.